Yeah, great to see you all here. Okay, so I think we've settled in enough, and we can begin. So again, good afternoon. At least it's afternoon here. I'm based in Montreal, or Jojage, which is on the unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka people, and it's a place that has long served as a meeting ground for many Indigenous peoples. And so wherever you're tuning in from, I invite you to reflect on the Indigenous stewards of the land where you are, and also on the deeper meaning of democracy that extends beyond colonial institutions. So today's event, we're hosting this event because, the issue of vetting, a process by which a small unelected group can decide who's allowed to run for the leadership of a party, or to run for office more generally, goes to the heart of democracy itself. And within the NDP, specifically, a 3-person committee can summarily block a candidate from even appearing on the ballot. And that means that thousands of members can be denied a say in their party's future based on decisions that are made behind closed doors. So this isn't just about one campaign or one party. It's about a pattern across politics, Canadian politics, and it's a pattern that protects power rather than people. And so today, what we want to do is we want to shine a light on that process. We want to learn from people who have experienced it firsthand. And we want to discuss, what's possible so that party democracy can really truly mean something. And so we're grateful to have with us a lineup of people who have faced these barriers directly and who have fought for a more democratic and accountable politics. So again, before we begin, I want to remind folks that the chat is open. Thank you for joining us again on fairly short notice. It's this is all very fast moving. Please keep your comments comradely, respectful, and we're also going to be having an opportunity for people to ask questions. So please do put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be returning to them later in the discussion. So our first speaker is Tom Baker, and Tom has been a longtime member of the NDP Socialist Caucus and was part of Sarah Jama's Hamilton Centre Riding Association executive when she was unjustly expelled from the Legislative Caucus by Ontario NDP leader Merritt Stiles. Tom was a leader in the fight for her reinstatement and currently serves as administration lead in Eve Engler's leadership campaign. So Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Bianca. This may not be the most riveting introduction to a webinar such as this, but so be it. Eve asked me if I could just say a few words. This will be short. Few words just describing the process. So there's no sort of political perspective here. It's just what do the rules say? So there's something called the Leadership Vote Committee in the NDP leadership rules. It's a committee established to determine an applicant's eligibility to be a leadership contestant in the leadership vote. So they're actually, we often refer to this as the vetting committee. There is no such thing. It's called the Leadership Vote Committee, but they do perform what we colloquially would call a vetting function. It's 3 members. One of them is well known to most of us, National Director Lucy Watson, table officer, who is an elected federal executive member. That is an elected position from convention. And the third person is an external party member chosen by the table officers. And those 3 people, those 3 positions, make up the Leadership Vote Committee. Their mandate is to review all application documents and determine who will become leadership contestants. This committee approves or rejects the applications after considering a whole list of things. I'm just going to touch on the high points here. First of all, they want to make sure that the applicants is in compliance with the eligibility criteria, including the meeting the principles and core values of the party. They want to make sure that this candidacy would be in the best interests of the party as a whole. Whether the applicant consistently shows integrity, honesty, professionalism, leadership, and respect for human rights, diversity, and equity. And then there's another bullet point, any other consideration that is appropriate in the circumstances. Has to be somebody who's suitable to represent the party in Parliament. And their behavior and public commentary aligns with the reputation and public image of the party. Just to put a brief editorial comment, I think you can see that many of these criteria are quite broad and open for interpretation. The applicant receives a leadership contestant package, prospective leadership contestant package. And there's a pile of forms in there. There's declaration of candidate responsibilities that you will abide by the Constitution rules and so on. But the kernel of this package is something called the Personal Disclosure Questionnaire. It's 11 pages, and that's before you fill in the answers. There's employment. They want to know about employment, education, and they drill down on each of these with sub-questions. Residency, any real estate one owns, community involvement, published works, online record, political activities, integrity, and accountability. And by accountability, they go in, drill down. They want to know a number of arrests, a number of charges, number of convictions, litigation, whether or not one was ever disciplined by an academic institution, and accusations of misconduct, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's a few other forms that are more or less just bureaucratic, sign off on the harassment policy, confidentiality agreement around the membership list, et cetera. However, it does say the Leadership Vote Committee can require other documents. Once again, very open-ended. The applicant has to be available for interview by the Leadership Vote Committee or to provide additional supportive documentation. The Leadership Vote Committee, I'm quoting, will make every effort to process applications as quickly as possible. After 20 business days, an applicant who has not received an update can request an update in writing, unquote. In terms of the process, I just want to go to this one last paragraph. Within 2 business days, a rejected applicant can request a review by 3 other table officers. And this new group is called the Review Committee. So it's 3 different people, and they're all table officers. Those would typically be from the party executive. The Leadership Vote Committee has 2 business days to provide reasons for the rejection to the Review Committee. So, and then within 2 business days of these receipt of these reasons, quote unquote, the applicant must deliver written submission in support of a request for review. So that's when that request would kick in. The Review Committee must complete their review within 3 business days. The CEO only intervenes in this whole process in the exceptional situation where the Review Committee was tied. They don't play a role in the Leadership Vote Committee. The Review Committee decision is final, and they also make the point that Review Committee members must not be working on leadership campaigns. So that's basically the details on how this is supposed to work. I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom. It's really good to have that background. Thank you for walking us through the mechanics of it. It's going to help us to have a more informed discussion. And yeah, thank you for your leadership on this and keeping track of all of these details. So next up, also welcome Dimitri to the discussion. Next up, we have Rana Zaman. Rana is a Halifax-based community activist known for her advocacy on social justice and peace issues. And she's going to share a little bit of her story as well and what that revealed. So welcome, Rana. The microphone is still.
Thank you. Thank you, Bianca. It's an honor to be a part of this panel. Such amazing people. Dimitri, he knows I'm a big fan of his and have been following him from day one. I am speaking from the unceded, unsurrendered land of the Mi'kmaq people. And my experience has been quite horrendous with the NDP. Not only as a woman of color, but as a Muslim. So when my nomination was taken away in 2019, I ran a very difficult campaign to win because it was a contested campaign and I did my best. And the mechanisms were working against me. The inner NDP mechanisms, I found out people reach out to me. At that time, I was very naive, thinking we're all one big happy family and we're here to support one another and may the best person win. To my shock, it was not that case. And in reality, kicked in after I won the nomination. So I want to start off by saying I was invited to join the NDP, the provincial NDP, when they saw the work I'm doing and everything. So they look for people, they think will add to the party. And so I joined the provincial party, and then I was encouraged to run for the federal party, which I did. Now, I had been completely vetted. And it took them a while because I was a human rights activist and a social activist. And so they did take their time to vet me to make sure. And they also know my stance on Palestine. And I'd been vetted and approved and allowed to run. And I went up against the machinery. I won. I won the nomination, which was a shock to everybody. And my husband that night said, "Oh, you must be very happy. You won." And I said, "Did you see that room?" So half the room was very jubilant, the people who came for me. The other half was total silence, total silence. And I barely even got any congratulations from that side of the room at all, like even from the leadership itself. And I said, it's just going to be a matter of time that they're going to find something to remove me. That night, I said it to my husband. And lo and behold, 1 month later, a tweet that had already been vetted and approved became problematic. And based on that, they asked me to step down. So I don't know if you want me to go into the details of that, but obviously it was a tweet on Palestine. And apparently the wording was problematic, even though it was a retweet. I retweeted Jews against genocide, and no one ever brings that up, that it was a retweet that said Jews against genocide. And the words they found problematic was that I used, I don't know if that's relevant or not, but the word Nazis and compared Gaza to Auschwitz, wondering if this is a new Gaza is a new Auschwitz. And so there was a lot of lobbying done, but they didn't even need that lobbying because they had already decided, they never expected I would win. So then I said, well, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of the wording. And they're saying, well, if you apologize, first, actually, I said, well, I can explain to them that I'm sorry if those words were problematic. I wasn't aware that that was apparently anti-Semitic to use the two words. That was it, just two words. And I said, I can explain that where I was coming from. And obviously that was not it. And then first of all, the hierarchy, they did not want, even for me at that time, it's like, well, no, it is problematic. And I don't think an apology will be sufficient. Like they're making these decisions already through phone calls and emails because they really don't want me, to find any way out. And I said, well, I don't understand. I have Jewish allies who said it wasn't such a big deal. And then she said, well, if you're going to apologize, the Jewish community is divided, so you're going to have to reach out to both sides. The both sides is the Atlantic Jewish Council that's here, which is a pro-Israeli Zionist group, hardcore. And just a side note, 6 months later, after I was removed from the NDP and I got I was nominated and I won the Human Rights Award, they lobbied privately had a private meeting with the Nova Scotia Human Rights Council and had my Human Rights Award rescinded, the first ever in the history of Canada to have an award, a Human Rights Award rescinded. And that's how powerful they are. So back and forth, I ended up sending the apology. Of course, one side said, yes, this is, it wasn't an issue with us to begin with, but yes, we accept your apology. The Atlantic Jewish Council deliberately did not respond. And then they, after that, the NDP said, unfortunately, effective immediately, you're no longer a candidate for the NDP. So, of course, then next morning I announced it and I said, I'm no longer, and then I explained and wrote that this is the issue. And that was it. And then they contact me saying, why did you say that? And I'm like, what? You just sent me an email like last night saying it's like, yeah, but you shouldn't have posted it. I'm like, are you trying to hide what you're doing? Like, I don't understand what they were trying to do. And I said, well, you said I'm not a candidate, so that's fact is fact. So of course, once that was out there, then all hell broke loose. Media came after me, strangers came after me, Benai, Brith, Sija, they all came after me. They were already after me, but then, congratulations, NDP, you upheld, values and this and that, and patting them on the back. And the next experience that I had with the NDP was when during the AGM, where the grassroots, membership tried very hard to get on the floor motion for Palestine. And I especially signed up, even though at that time I was no longer part of the NDP, I signed up so I could vote. And I saw the mechanics, and they knew that they were going to use mechanics behind the scenes to even prevent it from getting to vote. And they tried their best, and it ended up being they extended the others so long. It was the second motion throughout the whole AGM that was finally put forward. And as we all know, I think 80% or something voted in favor of it. But I find the leadership that's behind the scenes of the NDP are very anti-Palestinian. They're very pro-Zionist. They are, they're not really socialist because they're catering to the few. They're not catering to the membership. And I have been behind the scenes. And I will give you an example, and they would like to differentiate Nova Scotia NDP from federal NDP. I'm sorry, I went to the Nova Scotia NDP meeting with 60 plus leadership in the room. The regular meeting, AGM they had with the EDA representatives. So to me, those are leadership people. And of course, the MLAs, and at that time, Gary Burrell was the leadership. And I got the mic and I said, where were you when I was attacked and I was thrown under the bus? Not a single one of those 60 people reached out to me and said, hey, Rana, are you doing okay? We heard your nomination was taken away. We're so sorry. How are you doing? Not a single person reached out to me in that room that was part of the leadership. So if they're going to tell you they care about you, they're about the people, they don't care for the very person they invited to join. And I had so many people sign up and donate. I brought in a whole community of diversity that became part of the NDP. And that's all they wanted from me and nothing else. And then when it came to them to even show some humanity towards a person who thought of them as family, like I said, I was very naive and I was like, we're family. So my whole feeling about the NDP when it comes to the leadership, please let me make it clear, not the membership. The membership are wonderful people. They actually did, write, complain, and they did reach out. But the leadership, if you cannot bring them things, if they cannot use you and also control you, this is what I noticed. They want candidates that will talk the talk that they want talked, walk the walk that they want walked. As long as you're a puppet for the NDP, you're going to go far. But as long as you show that you have a mind or brain of your own and you are a team player and you ask, and when they ask you jump and you say, okay, but why? They want a person who says, okay, how high? Like they just want you to blindly jump to everything. And I'm not one of those people. And I am very passionate about people and fairness, equality, equity, humanity. And I thought the NDP was all that, and I was devastated. I was devastated. And you don't know the horror I went through. Dimitri, you do. I think you get more hate. And now Yves Engler knows, right? The violence and the hate that comes towards anyone who is pro-Palestine, they are a target is labeled at them. So when you consider who is untouchable in our communities or in our countries, then they are the ones who are basically controlling the leadership, and everybody has to bow down to them. Otherwise, you're not going to get far anywhere. And that's my experience. I hope that's my time, I believe, is if there's a lot more to share, and there's a lot of answers, and there's a lot of things that I can tell you behind the mechanisms, but my time is up. So I'll say thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rana. It's really heartbreaking to hear your story. But thank you for sharing it with us, and thanks for sharing what you went through. Winning a nomination against the odds, only to face this silencing, the retaliation, this dehumanization, and as you said, the horror. Really, just the unbelievable personal cost of standing up for justice inside political institutions. So it takes further enormous courage to keep speaking up about it after that kind of experience. So we're very grateful to have you here, and look very forward to hearing more from you during the discussion. Thank you, Rana. Okay, so we're next going to hear from Barry Weisleder. Barry is the chair of the NDP Socialist Caucus and federal secretary of the Socialist Action, which helped to launch the Socialist Caucus 28 years ago. He's a union organizer, writer, editor, and retired teacher based in Toronto. Barry's long spoken out against undemocratic practices and has personally experienced exclusion. So Barry, the floor is yours.
Hello, comrades and friends across Turtle Island and beyond. Yes, I've been a member of the NDP for 57 years. I just counted to make sure. And this particular story goes back to August 2011. In August 2011, Thornhill NDP held its candidate nomination meeting in preparation for a provincial election that was held on October 6th, 2011. The Thornhill NDP executive invited me to seek the nomination to be their candidate in Thornhill, which is a community just north of the city of Toronto. I won the nomination by a wide margin at a well-attended meeting of Thornhill NDP. A day later, I received a phone call from Darlene Lawson. Darlene was the provincial secretary and was a friend of mine in university where we belonged to the same socialist organization. She called to say to me that she had rescinded my nomination. Why? I asked, since I had been vetted weeks earlier. In fact, I had a meeting with Darlene Lawson in her office, the NDP headquarters, to confirm it. Darlene's answer was that I wrote an article about the Ontario political scene some 6 months earlier, and that article included criticism of the Ontario NDP leader at the time, Andrea Horwath. I pointed out that I was a journalist and had been for decades, and posted my articles to a wide audience. I criticized all party leaders regularly as a function of that responsibility I took on. My articles were not hidden from view. NDP officials had access to all of them. So why the sudden overturn of the nomination in Thornhill? No answer. I can only conclude that NDP officials were expecting a different nomination vote result. Unwilling to have a socialist candidate and surprised that I won the nomination, they decided to rescind it and insert another candidate in my place. Of course, the party brass was quite aware that I was, and still am, co-chair of the NDP Socialist Caucus. In that period, the party brass, provincially and federally, made a habit of blocking socialists who sought to be an NDP candidate. And for those who think that this practice began more recently, like under Tom Mulcair or Jagmeet Singh, that's not true. It actually started during and before Jack Layton. Jack did the most of all recent NDP leaders to centralize the party and to exercise top-down control. Although I like Jack personally, and I'm sad that he's no longer with us, but the truth must be told. They not only had a practice of blocking socialists, they particularly targeted pro-Palestinian contenders, and I think Rana has attested to that. The Socialist Caucus challenged this anti-democratic practice and similar practices. We presented policy resolutions to party conventions to say that basically, apart from checking, criminality under Canadian law, the status of individuals, the vetting should be simply the product of the democratic vote of the membership to choose the local candidate or to vote for any other elected position in the party. So we presented resolutions to that effect, and resolutions as well that called for more time to be dedicated at party conventions to the debate of policy and constitutional amendments. Somehow these resolutions never quite make it to the floor for debate and vote. But there's a long legacy of these resolutions, and Socialist Caucus has led the way. We ran candidates for party executive. Occasionally, we won executive posts, such as recently with the Indigenous Peoples Representative to the Ontario NDP executive. That was at the Niagara Falls Convention of the Ontario NDP. We continued to struggle at all levels, leading to the Yves Engler campaign currently, which has massive support. And it's good to see so many people joining this webinar today. That would not be possible if not the groundwork that had been laid and much more work to be done in the future. So what does democracy mean? Democracy means that NDP members, the grassroots, have the right to decide their candidates, who they should be, who the party leaders should be, and what policies should define the party's goals and means. Why does the NDP matter? Why participate in it, particularly for decades and decades and decades? Well, the answer is very simple. The NDP is the only labor-based political party in North America. There is no Labor Party in the United States. And the NDP was born out of a merger between the CCF and the NDP in 1960-61. Instead of joining the Liberal Party, working people and their leaders decided we needed a party of our own as a working class. So that's why it matters and continues to matter. Democracy is the oxygen of the workers' movement. If NDP officials stifle democracy, they choke the life out of the party. They also doom the party and hasten its replacement by a worthy instrument of a genuine workers' agenda. Yves' campaign is creating space for socialist politics on the left, on the radical left in this country. And that in itself is noteworthy. So the struggle continues. The sooner you join us, the sooner we will win. Thank you, and I look forward to questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Barry. Thank you for sharing your story with us. It really resonates, and I really want to remind people that these stories are not isolated. There are dozens like them, and each one revealing a pattern that cuts across the political spectrum. Look very, very forward to hearing more from you, Barry, during the discussion where we can broaden the picture even further. So next, we're going to be hearing from Alex Tyrrell. Alex is a left-wing activist and the longtime leader of the Green Party of Quebec. In 2022, he was abruptly expelled from the federal Green Party just days after announcing his intention to run for national leadership. The reason given by the party establishment included his opposition to NATO's proxy war in the Ukraine and his criticism of Elizabeth May's 2019 campaign, particularly her support for continued tar sands extraction, public funding for bitumen-ready oil refineries, and the plan to move Alberta oil east. Alex, please go ahead.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. It's really interesting to hear all of these different stories about vetting. And I think that it's very important because one of the places that Canadian democracy is most open to influence and manipulation, that sort of thing, is during the leadership races. Because unlike a general election, the leadership races are not overseen by Elections Canada or provincial bodies, that sort of thing. So it really gives a huge amount of influence to the party insiders and establishment, the people that are on the executive and that have been around the party for a certain amount of time. I think that vetting is political, right? If they are finding reasons to block people over a tweet or things like that, like these are not like human resources kind of issues, right? These are political issues that they don't want people that are saying certain things to run for their party. And by vetting those people out, they're sending a message that what those people stand for is so different from what the party establishment wants to project. So, I have a somewhat unique perspective on this because, as you mentioned, Bianca, I was thrown out of the 2022 Green Party of Canada leadership race, but I'm also the leader of a provincial party and actually have to vet candidates at the provincial level, right? So, when you vet a candidate out, it's sending a message. If I tell somebody that they can't run for the Green Party because they're right wing or they have said racist things or stuff like that, it's a political message that I'm sending by vetting the person out, right? So I think that that's what really the left is up against, is that there's no left-wing party in Canada. And there's definitely left-wing people that are seeking nomination and leadership and, running in internal elections and that sort of thing. But we're consistently being blocked by the party insiders. There's a number of different ways that they can do it, right? In my case, as soon as I had started circulating my nomination papers for the federal Green Party leadership, they called me to a meeting and essentially said that I'd be thrown out of the party. And if I'm not a member of the party, then I can't submit a candidacy for leadership. And not only that, but it applied to that current leadership race. And now it's 3 years later, and I'm still not a member of the federal party. And there's a leadership race coming up. So it's something that, can last quite a bit longer. So I think that's an unfortunate situation, but for the left to take control of these political parties, it takes more than just a leadership campaign, right? It has to be a more sustained effort over time that brings people into the executive positions, that sort of thing. And it's really difficult to do because those people can often get worn down. The party establishment hacks away at them. And it can be quite difficult, but it takes a massive movement. The other way that they can derail progressive campaigns is, like, for example, what we saw in the BC Green Party leadership race very recently, where a young 25-year-old woman named Emily Lowen was running on a campaign where her slogan was "Fight the oligarchs and fund our future," pro-Palestinian, explicitly left-wing. And what the party insiders did over there was they attempted to differentiate between new members and old members. So the members who were signed up before the leadership race started were given a superior status in the sense that they did not have to provide ID and go through a verification process before being able to vote, whereas the people who signed up after the leadership race was started had to go through this process. And of course, Emily's campaign was heavily relying on signing up new people to the party. So in that case, they used the idea of threats of foreign influence to stop some people from voting, even though they had paid with a credit card in their name to be able to vote in a leadership race. So there's a lot of different tactics everywhere. Luckily, Emily actually made it through and is now the leader of the BC Green Party. So she won by 60% on the first ballot. So sometimes if you do have the support, it is possible to make it through. But, in other cases, like Dimitri is probably about to tell us about, to be the person finishing second place in the leadership race and 1 week before the party's trying to expel him from the leadership race, like there's a lot of manipulation here. And, it takes a lot of strength to get through these different tactics that party establishments can use to silence left-wing voices in leadership race and local nomination campaigns and within the party itself. So the more people can be involved in this, more progressives can be involved in party politics and trying to shift things, the better it can be. And I know a lot of people on the left don't like to be involved in formal party politics, but I think that it's one of many tactics that can help move the debate to the left in Canada and in the provinces, and that it's definitely, being involved with the party is a tactic that the left has neglected for a long time. And I think that some of these expulsions and vetting problems are kind of due to that. So that's it. I encourage everybody to get involved with campaigns like Eve's and other left-wing campaigns within, sometimes more centrist political parties.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. What you've described really shows how this does extend across political parties and how these barriers really do stifle democratic debate, even amongst those who are claiming to represent alternatives. And I really hear you, and I hope the audience does too, around the challenge to get in the ring and not stay on the sidelines. And look forward to hearing more from you during the discussion. So that brings us to our final speaker, Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri is a lawyer, human rights activist, and former leadership candidate for the Green Party of Canada. He's based in Montreal. He's formerly an NDP member before joining the Greens and has written extensively about foreign policy, imperialism, democratic reform. And he's going to close us out with his own experience as well as some reflections on what's needed to go forward. Dimitri, over to you.
Thank you, Bianca. Pleasure to be here with such committed and principled political activists. Thank you for inviting me. So as Bianca indicated, I'm first going to tell you about my experience with vetting in the Green Party, and then I'm going to tell you how I think this process should work if we really care about democracy and the will of the members of the party. So for you to understand my experience with the vetting process in the Green Party, I need to go back in time a little bit and first tell you that I ran to be as the candidate for the Green Party of Canada in London West in 2015. And at that time, I was vetted with no difficulty. I sailed through the vetting process. And it's important to understand that at that point in time, I was a partner in a law firm in Ontario called Siskins. There were about 25 partners, and there were a number of people in that partnership who were quite pro-Israel. So although I was a strong supporter of the Palestinian cause, I was constantly having to survey my language about the subject when I spoke publicly about it, because I would get some serious heat from my partners, one of whom, told me that we were going to actually lose clients and a lot of business if I wasn't careful. So after the 2015 election, I retired from the partnership of Siskins. And frankly, one of the reasons why I did that, there's a whole bunch of reasons, but one of them was I was sick and tired of having to worry about how my public commentary was going to affect the business of the partnership. And so at that point, I became very outspoken about the Palestinian cause. And a whole bunch of stuff happened in 2016 after Elizabeth May appointed me to the shadow cabinet of the Green Party as justice critic. I won't get into that because time doesn't permit it. But the thing you need to know is I then became quite outspoken about the Palestinian cause. So fast forward to 2020, when I decided to run to be the leader of the Green Party of Canada, I went through a vetting process that was very similar to the one that Tom described for the NDP. In fact, as far as I can tell, the only difference between the process for qualifying to be a leadership candidate in the NDP, the only meaningful one, and for being a candidate for the leadership of the Green Party is that the entrance fee is much bigger. I believe the entrance fee in 2020 in the Green Party was 25 grand, which is hefty for a Green Party candidate. Whereas I understand the NDP entry fee is $100,000. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right.
So I fill out this detailed questionnaire, and they've got a committee of 3 persons. It's very similar. They give it some fancy Orwellian name. When I go through this process, I submit the detailed documentation, then I do an interview, and they reject my candidacy, which wasn't a particular surprise because I'd had a number of run-ins with Elizabeth May by that point in time over the Palestinian cause. So I appealed. And they then provided to me a so-called explanation of why they rejected me. It was a 1-page document with 5 sentences on it, each sentence representing a separate reason for the rejection. And I'll tell you that as a lawyer who does litigation, if those were reasons that had been given by a judge for doing something as serious as rejecting a candidate who's running to be leader of a party, and let's bear in mind here, it's not just the members who are prejudiced when you reject a candidate. There's reputational damage to you. And I care a hell of a lot about my reputation. I'm sure all the people here, Rana, Alex, Barry, who've experienced this thing, they're also worried about how they are going to be perceived publicly after the rejection. So it was just the mere fact that they were so, uninformative in terms of explaining the basis of the reason. That in and of itself is an injustice. Now, I'm not going to get into all the reasons. I can just summarize it as follows. There were 5 reasons given, and 4 of them are related to my advocacy for Palestine. I can't even remember what the 5th one was because it was so ludicrous. And frankly, I think they threw it in there because they didn't want all the reasons to be related to Palestine. So they had to throw in something symbolically that had nothing to do with Palestine. And I'll just give you one example of the 4 Palestine-related reasons that they gave me. In 2018, I think it was, Eve and I and a couple of other activists disrupted a disgraceful presentation by Erwin Kotler at Concordia University, where he was being feted by this organization called the Montreal Institute for Genocide, which, by the way, hasn't said a word about the genocide in Israel, and actually was shut down by Concordia a few months ago. And I got up on the stage, as did Eve and some other activists, and I stood beside Kotler. And I said to him, is there anything Israel can do to cause you to criticize Israel? Anything. Just name one thing that it can do. And he refused to answer my question. And then I said, you're a fraud. You're a human rights fraud. And it's disgraceful that people regard you as a human rights champion. All hell broke loose. And the Canadian Parliament denounced us. They actually denounced us in Canada's Parliament. And they gave Kotler standing ovations to reaffirm his status as a champion of human rights. So they cited this as one of the reasons for rejecting me. So then I went through the appeal, and I gave extensive written submissions, and then there was an interview with the 3 members of the committee. The questioning was quite hostile, and when the thing was over, I was convinced that I was going to lose the appeal, and to my amazement, I won. I can only speculate as to why I won. My best guess is that at some point in the course of that oral appeal, when they were questioning me, I said something along the lines of, I'm a lawyer and I know how to defend my reputation, and I will do so vigorously. You can be sure of that. So I didn't explicitly threaten them with litigation, but they might have interpreted that as a threat of litigation. At the end of the day, I don't know. I don't know why they accepted my appeal, but they did. And so I was allowed into the race. As Alex indicated, it didn't stop there. The attempts to ensure that I lost. Elizabeth May had said before I entered the race, before I announced my intention to run, that she was required as a former leader to be completely neutral. Those were her words. As soon as I entered the race, she began to aggressively advocate for people to contribute to the campaign of Annemie Paul, who turned out to be, by the way, a fanatical Zionist. And she even admitted in a Toronto Star op-ed that she herself authored, after Annemie Paul's leadership crashed and burned, she was the one who won that year, 2020. The result was I got 45% of the vote on the 8th and final ballot, and she got 55% of the vote. So she crashes and burns, and then people started saying Elizabeth May sabotaged her. So Elizabeth May does this op-ed, and she says, "Mea culpa. I actually supported Annie Paul, vigorously. How dare they say that I undermined her leadership?" So not only that, but a few days before the voting began, at that point, people had contributed, I think it was like 175,000 or 200,000. I think it was actually over $200,000 in my campaign. So people were giving their hard-earned money to our campaign, and Elizabeth May was trying to get me expelled from the party. And I learned this by somebody who was privy to the discussions that were going on and leaked the information to me. And I have no doubt that what I was told was accurate. So my feeling about all of this is that it's profoundly undemocratic. And I think the only people who should decide who is and is not fit to be a candidate in a riding or for the leadership or to sit on the national council or to be the national director are the members. That's it. No one else should have any role in determining that. And I'm going to explain to you how I think it should work in a moment. But I want to stress that, in Canada, as I'm sure all of you probably have appreciated by now, there is a very narrow range of permissible political discourse. And the political system has set up a series of filters to ensure that anybody who runs for political office for any party that has a representation in Parliament is squarely within those suffocating boundaries of permissible political discourse. The vetting process is one of those filters, but another one is also the entrance fee. $100,000. A lot of people aren't going to be able to raise that kind of money. Find people, excellent candidates. And so, especially if they're radical and they have people from the establishment of the party trying to, discourage people from contributing to their campaigns. So we should eliminate all of these filters. But this vetting thing is profoundly undemocratic. You heard Tom explain how it works. These people have vast discretion. Okay, the criteria that they could basically come up with anything. Those criteria are so broadly worded and they're so ambiguous that they could invent any reason for excluding somebody. At a bare minimum, if you're going to have people empowered to do that, I would say those people should be directly elected by the members. There should be positions that are open to a vote, an electoral process within the party, and only those people who are directly empowered by the members to decide who can and cannot be candidates should have that power, which is not the case in any of the political parties that have a representation in Parliament. And the other thing I want to say before I talk about how I think this should work is that the ironclad proof that this whole vetting business is morally bankrupt and corrupt to the core is that the people who survive the vetting process are war criminals. Yes, they're war criminals. Justin Trudeau is a war criminal. Anita Anand is a war criminal. Mark Carney is a war criminal. Pierre Poilievre, he would be a war criminal if he had the power to actually do something. He's even more fanatical than they are in their support of Israel. They are aiding and abetting an in-your-face, fuck you genocide that's been happening for over 2 years. And any vetting process that allows those people to run to be the leader of a political party or to become a minister of a party, but which keeps people like us out, that is a corrupt to the core anti-democratic process. You can take that to the bank. So how do I think this should work? I think that there should be a detailed questionnaire, the questions of which should be, rational questions to ask a candidate, that should elicit the kinds of information the members would legitimately care about. So, for example, do you have a criminal record? Have you committed academic fraud? Have you ever gone bankrupt? Okay, those types of things that the members would want to know. What is your education? Have you ever been given any types of distinctions in the course of your academic work? Things like that. So that questionnaire, once completed, should be published and should be made available to all the members. And the only circumstance under which a candidate should be disqualified, in my opinion, is if it is discovered that the candidate made a material misrepresentation in answering the questionnaire. That's it. Otherwise, the members should make the decision. Now, you may say, well, wow, this might result in somebody who has like a murderer, somebody who's a convicted murderer running for political office. It may surprise you to hear me say, so what? Why do I say that? Because I thought that, parties like the NDP, the Green Party, uh, these progressive, nominally socialist or social democratic parties believe in the concepts of redemption and rehabilitation. People can do things in earlier stages of their life that they're very bad things, terrible things, and then learn from them and evolve and become outstanding human beings. And we as a society should be encouraging that. We shouldn't say that because somebody years ago did something that we regard as disreputable, even criminal, that they should be disqualified forever from being candidates for political office. I think that's wrong. I think it's profoundly contrary to our whole stated commitment to rehabilitation and redemption. So at the end of the day, I think that's how this process should work. And as long as we don't fix this process, then all the candidates who ultimately emerge from it are going to be firmly ensconced in that suffocatingly narrow boundaries of political discourse in this country, and nothing ain't ever going to change.
Wow. Thank you. Thanks, Dimitri. Thank you. That was powerful. Thank you for that detailed account, for laying out so clearly how these systems are designed to filter out real debate at a time when we need it more than ever. And your story, really riveting, drives home how profoundly undemocratic it is for a few insiders, not members, to decide who's even allowed on the ballot. And thanks for laying out a truly, transformative vision of how that could work. A lot of things were pointed out that are very important: the $100,000 barrier, the ambiguous open-ended criteria, the idea of the mechanisms that narrow what is politically permissible. And I think that's why these conversations matter very, very much. And again, I want to remind people that these are a few stories, but we've heard now stories that echo across the country, from the NDP to the Greens, and other cases, be it Sarah Jama in Hamilton or Paul Manley in Nanaimo. And so this is part of something much larger. And we can dig into that a little bit more. So with that, let's move into a few questions for our panel. Thanks to people at home who've been putting their questions in the Q&A, and we will get to some of those as well. I just want to say, thank you for the political courage that we're seeing in our panelists today. So the first question that I have, we often hear that vetting ensures quote unquote party unity or protects against controversy. And so I'd like to know how you would respond to that argument. And we've heard a little bit about that, but I'd love to hear a bit more from panelists on that. And we can start with you, Rana.
Dimitri had covered a lot of it, and I believe, Barry, you had mentioned the vetting process is to bring together like-minded people of values who represent the party and the values it's allegedly established for. And that is why we join, because our values are aligned with this party or this party. It's like, that is what I want. That is what I believe in. That is, what I hope for. So we join in based on that. But what I found for me personally, my values aligned with them all the way. I was the star, a woman. I was a woman, a person of color, and a Muslim who had joined the Nova Scotia NDP. Please remember, I joined Nova Scotia NDP first. Somebody asked in the question, was this the Nova Scotia NDP that treated me like this or the federal? Let me tell you unequivocally, they're all the same, the leadership. The Nova Scotia NDP brought me in. That room of 60 people were all Nova Scotia NDP leaderships from the EDAs that totally ignored me. And even at that event when I spoke, only one person in that room came to me during the lunch hour and said, I had no idea you had been treated like that. And the rest of them averted their eyes from me. So that tells you how entrenched they are in their value system. And once you're not useful to them and you're considered untouchable, you're out, no matter how right you were. That is what they're taught. And the federal NDP was even worse because they tried to hide everything. They literally threw me under the bus and tried to make it worse because they wanted their candidate of choice, who they felt was more malleable and controllable, is what I'm assuming. Otherwise, there was no need, because they were told not to get rid of me. They were told by my representatives, no, Rana has a great chance, do not. But the people who didn't back me was the Nova Scotia NDP. They said, no, you're making the right choice, get rid of her. Because they were showing up for the other candidates' events, even though they're told to be neutral. They were sharing her pages and not mine. So I told you there was an inner mechanism. So please do not doubt that there is a difference between the provincial or the federal. The only thing that's unified are the memberships. Their values are unified. They're there believing that this is what we stand for and this is what this party is going to uphold on our behalf. You are not being respected. Your values are not being upheld. And if someone becomes a subject matter, becomes untouchable, in this case, it's Palestine. Plain and simple. There's really nothing else you can do. Of course, misogyny, racism, and all that is there, but nothing is a death kiss than when you speak up for Palestine on a political level. And many people have found out, even working at work, because the lobbyists come after you. So that would be my answer for the values. The leadership, they have their own agendas and their own values that they're upholding. And everyone here has experienced that. And now I am also, to make it clear, I did end up running in 2019 for the Green Party. And at that time, it was under Anime Paul. And people are shocked, how did I even make it through the vetting process? But they did put it through. But here's the thing. The lobbyists came after me again and tried to have that candidacy removed as well. So they tried to remove me as a candidate, as a Green candidate. And you know who stood up for me? It was the few people that were part of the inner core team. And they said, we watched everything she said. Things are taken out of context. And if we're not going to support the, people like her, then what are we here for? And those people took a stand in the federal level of the NDP, and the provincial supported me. The provincial also went out. So they came together at that time and actually went against Anna May Paul. And she tried very hard to get rid of me. So, not being biased, but I ended up running. The proof is I ended up running, even though the Zionist lobbyists tried to get rid of me at that time again. And they did label me anti-Semitic, obviously, and that's what they want to keep using against me, and had me blacklisted through media. I was blacklisted in media. I haven't received a single award since 2019, my Human Rights Award, because if my name pops up, I don't get it. Before that, I was getting once or twice. And the reason I'm saying this is I was just nominated for the YMCA Peace Award. And thank you, since 2019. And guess what? They made up an issue with another post I did and tried to have with the Green Party and tried to have me removed again and they complained about the Peace Award, and I'm quite sure they're going to go after the Y as well. So once you've been labeled, they will come after you to make sure your voice never gets amplified. And one of the reasons I keep running and putting myself out there for this abuse is because I won't let them bury me. And when I do run, you know whose voice and subject matter gets amplified? Palestine. So I'm not in any delusion of winning, but I know Palestine will be amplified. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Wonderful. Saw a few people nodding. If anyone wants to jump in, go ahead. Go ahead, Barry.
Yep. Well, thanks for the question, and thanks to Rana for her courage, her perseverance, and her commitment to continue the struggle. As I said in my introduction, the NDP was founded as a class party. This is not just a matter of, well, its policies are slightly better than the Green Party or the Liberal Party. Actually, some of the time, the existing policies of the NDP are better than the others, and some of the time they're not. That's not the critical thing. The critical thing is the class nature of the NDP. It's a working class party. If you go to an NDP convention, you see all the delegates sitting at tables, and a third of the tables have signs on them that proclaim the name of the union affiliated to the NDP that is represented at that convention by those delegates. Now, the delegate selection process in the unions is not perfect. It leaves a lot to be desired. And the same can be said for the NDP constituency organizations. But you have a right to expect that in a labor-based political party, that there'll be pro-labor, pro-worker, a workers' agenda, anti-capitalist, socialist policies. It's obligatory. Logically, the interests of the working class should be expressed through its party and a program that is consistent with its interests. If those socialist policies don't appear, there's something wrong. But if those socialist policies don't appear in one of the other parties, one shouldn't be surprised, because those parties are not accountable to the working class directly, to its organizations, seniors organizations, tenants organizations, grassroots union organizers. They're not tied to those. The NDP is tied. Now, that tie is weakening, it's fraying at the edges, but it's still there. And that's why we're getting such an amazing response to the Eve Engler campaign. The leadership is entrenched. That's the correct word to use. But guess what, folks? It's weaker now than ever. Weaker now than ever. Why? Because on April 28th, the NDP was reduced to 7 MPs. It lost, 13 or 14 or more. And as a consequence, it lost 150 staff positions paid for by the taxpayer through Parliament. This was evident at the NDP Ontario Convention in Niagara Falls. Most of the time, the 3 days, there were fewer than 450 people in the seats in that room at the convention. There may be another 50 or 60 online at home or remotely otherwise, but the party claimed that there were close to 1,000 delegates. That was not visible at any time during the convention. I'm not celebrating this decrease in the turnout, not far from it. I'm just saying this is a moment that represents the best opportunity for the socialist left in decades, perhaps ever, to challenge for its position. What will be the result of the Eve's campaign? We can't say, but it is enlarging space for genuine socialist politics. And if you want to know what I mean by genuine socialist politics, go to the Eve Engler campaign website and read the platform. 47 pages, aggregated by a committee of plus 40 individuals from coast to coast to coast, speaking to all the issues that matter. That's what's stirring about this. And the fact that there's a leadership race occurring in the NDP facilitated drawing the attention of many, many people to this effort. And it's not going to stop there. If we are blocked or otherwise frustrated or impeded in terms of the work we're trying to do, we will look seriously as a collectivity on what to do next. Somehow, there must be a way to advance a workers' agenda in this country. Canada's on fire. Wars are forever. The economy, the crisis of affordability is apparent. No young person can anticipate ever owning a home. This has to be challenged in such a rich country, which is doing so much damage to Indigenous people in its mining practices in Central and Latin America and Africa and Asia. Something can and must be done. People have an appetite for it, and now is the time for us to build this campaign and take it as far as it can, and then discuss what we should do next.
Thank you, Barry. Yeah, so many key ideas there. Let's open it up. Let's open up to others for a moment. Alex?
Yeah, so I just wanted to get back to the question about party unity, right? Because in the Canadian political media landscape, any kind of disagreement within parties is really sensationalized and, capitalized on by the media. So I think that for an insurgent campaign to succeed in not being expelled and potentially winning, it has to reach the point where the expulsion of that candidate would break party unity, because people, believe that person should be in the debate and be able to have their voice heard. So you have to build up a certain amount of momentum to reach that kind of tipping point. And like on the other side of it, I think that, it is important for party unity to have a certain amount of vetting because let's say, for myself, like as a left-wing leader of a political party, I could be asked to answer why I would have accepted a certain right-wing candidate, for example. And one of the things that I did when I first won the Green Party of Quebec leadership back in 2013, of course, a party that traditionally didn't have any party discipline, is I said that, anybody who was supporting the Quebec Charter of Values at the time, which was a bill that proposed to ban all government employees from wearing any kind of religious symbols and that sort of thing, and really targeting the Muslim community in particular. Well, for me, like supporting those policies, I find it discriminatory. And it's not because like the Parti Québécois government, said that that was their policy, that somehow it changed the morality of, these issues. And so I didn't want to have people running for the Green Party who supported that kind of right-wing attack on religious minorities. And I put party discipline in that. I asked all the potential candidates to fill out a very long political questionnaire. And that way, when we accept somebody as a candidate, people know that they represent the values of the party. So I think that there is a role in vetting. And, for a left wing leader to say, well, in my party, there will be no vetting, we'll accept just anybody, you can quickly have more right wing people coming in and breaking party unity in that sense and embarrassing the party in the media and really making it spin its wheels. So, like, there is a place for vetting, but it's how is the vetting done? Like, who are you going to defend and who are you going to throw under the bus? And the establishment of these more centrist kind of parties, they don't defend left-wing people. They don't defend anybody who's received any criticism for a tweet over Palestine or that sort of thing. So it's about where the orientations lie, in my view, not about the vetting itself, but how the vetting is done and for what objective and with what political ideological background.
Whoops, my apologies. Thank you, Alex. So my next question is really specific. It's for Tom. You had mentioned in your introduction how you were part of the Sarah Jama campaign, and I'm wondering if you could very briefly speak to us about how the ONDP stopped her from running, the specific ways in which she was blocked, and what this revealed.
Sure, I'll won't do justice to it in length, but just hit the high spots. After Sarah Jama was expelled from the NDP provincial caucus by the leader unilaterally, right? By the way, there was no protocols for this. After she was expelled, she formed an independent constituency association, which is kind of standard practice when these things happen. Because she has a constituency there and it's funded and she's popular, etc. So that was formed. And I have to say the NDP riding, which I was the president of at that time, we didn't accept this. We stood by Sarah. All of the executive were members of Sarah's constituency association, while maintaining our posts in the party so that we could push back, against her unjust expulsion. And that was a ongoing battle. And the party paid a huge price for that. I mean, essentially lost a generation of young activists, and it wasn't just Hamilton; it was across the province and even nationally. So, anyways, then comes the provincial election this spring in Ontario. Sarah knew that in Hamilton Centre, the best chance of her being reelected was as an NDP candidate. That's how she got elected in the first place. And so she submitted her application, and we were very supportive of that, needless to say. They ignored it. It was just zero response. So we put the pressure on that. The NDP party executive, had to admonish the provincial director to send her the application package. So that pressure worked to that extent. Of course, she got vetted out fairly quickly, actually, after this. And there's one person vetting committee in the Ontario NDP, and that's the provincial director. So a consensus was reached quickly. Excuse that she asked for, she was told that she belonged to another political party called the Independent Constituency Association of Hamilton Center. So therefore, she wasn't eligible to be a candidate. It's a totally impossible situation. I mean, how, what else was she supposed to do? At any rate, that I'll just leave it there. But I have to say that the party activists in Hamilton Center stood by Sarah, including in her attempt to get reelected as an independent campaign. But we maintained our party, most of us maintained our party memberships to fight back against the NDP.
Thank you, Tom, for sharing that important story. Rana has come to the end of her time, and so I just wanted to say bye to her, as she won't be able to participate in the rest of the discussion. Any final remarks from you, Rana, before you go to your next commitment?
I want to thank you, Bianca, and of course the esteemed guests here. You've helped me learn so much, and you make me feel so not alone. So thank you for that camaraderie. All the amazing comments and people who've joined in, you are obviously people who care, who want to learn, who want to be aware. Become ambassadors of what's happening and start educating one another. We are being controlled by the few. Our parties are not really our parties, and I'm going to say that across the board, right? And we have to stay on top of true democracy, and the only one who can do it is you, the people. So support the candidates who are not popular, because they're not popular for a reason, because they're advocating. I would love to do this again. Thank you so much. It honestly is such an honor and a privilege to be here. And thank you for all the wonderful comments and support. You've made my day. And take care and stay blessed. Please let's do this again.
Rana. Bye, Rana. Solidarity. We the people. Thank you so much. Thank you. Wonderful. All right, so I'm going to move on to next question. I've heard some people in the chat talking about the subject of courage. So my question is, at a time of global crisis, wars, climate breakdown, inequality, can we afford a system that filters out truth tellers, that filters out bold ideas? And what does genuine political courage look like inside these rigid systems? Kind of a big question, but I'd love to hear from you. I haven't heard from you yet, Dimitri.
Courage is, in the context of politics, as in journalism, is challenging the powerful, punching up and holding them to account. And there are precious few people in Canadian politics who do that precisely for the reasons we discussed. There are these filters. Another filter, by the way, is that massive entry fee. Then the corporate media are a filter. And I just want to, address what Alex talked about in terms of how he has dealt with vetting. I think, Alex, you and I have had, a friendly debate about this in the past. And I certainly understand your concerns. They're entirely legitimate concerns. But the question that I ask is, what is the cost of setting up a system which ensures that the kinds of people who supported the kinds of policies you're talking about don't run to be candidates for your party? I think the costs are too high. So this whole question is analogous to the whole question of censorship. This is a form of censorship at the end of the day. And I'm a free speech radical because once people start picking what can and cannot be said, inevitably they're going to use that power to censor against you, against people of principle, people who have real courage. So I understand that there is a cost to a system that doesn't weed out the types of policies and candidates that you described, Alex. But I think the greater cost is setting up a system which empowers people to exclude people from even running. If the party, if you have a party that's truly committed to the core values of the Green Party of Quebec, then the kind of people who you're concerned about, I don't think they stand a realistic chance of winning, of being approved, of winning a leadership race or of winning in their own riding.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important from a moral standpoint. Like me, I wouldn't want to stand on a stage as Green Party leader with like Zionists, for example, and say like these are good people, like the population should vote for them. If I'm standing on the same political stage as somebody that's running as a candidate for the party that I'm leading, then it's because I agree with them on 90% of things about. So is there a cost to it? I mean, yeah, there is a cost because, especially for the Green Party, you want to have as many candidates as possible. So there's definitely times when, the Green Party of Quebec could be tempted to accept people that really maybe we shouldn't because, well, we'd have another candidate on the ballot, they'd get votes and we get funding from it. So it's much more difficult to impose like an ideological discipline within a small party like the Green Party because it narrows down the number of people that you can have as candidates. But I think that it is important, and also I don't see why the left, when here clearly the left-wing candidates are being vetted out of all the major parties in Canada. If the left were to take power in one of those parties, why would we allow the right-wing people, the Zionists, and that sort of thing to run as candidates when clearly in the opposite direction they're applying a very rigid discipline to it. And I think that a leadership race is the time to have these kind of debates. So I don't think that people should really be blocked from leadership races. But when it comes to running as candidates on the team for a party, the population, when they look at the parties, they expect a certain amount of ideological consistency within the people who are running under that banner. So if you take away all party discipline and you say, well, anybody who applies can run, the population will start to voice discontent with that and say, what do you mean this person is running for you, and how can you stand for that, and that sort of thing. So I think it's a delicate balancing act.
Yeah. So on my end, I'm definitely really appreciating this. I think in a discussion about free speech, disagreement is a great and important thing to have. And I think it's clear that even among people who care very deeply about democracy, there's different, ideas about what protecting that might look like. This tension between the openness and wanting some safeguards is a real one, and it's good to surface. But, at the heart of it, I think we all want a system that trusts members to make decisions rather than insiders behind closed doors. Any other thoughts on this from other panelists before we move on? As brief as possible. We want to get to the Q&A.
Right. You asked what is courage in times like these. I want to give a few examples of courage. Indigenous people blocking XL pipelines, facing RCMP and soldiers heavily equipped who arrest them and who throw them into the back of a truck to be taken for processing by the authorities. That's an example of courage. Students who say no to university investment in the Zionist state genocide machine. Those who stand up for boycott, divestment, sanctions. The hundreds of students who walked out of Toronto secondary schools yesterday to protest TDSB policy that bars the discussion of anti-Palestinian racism and the need to end it. Socialist caucus candidates who ran against the establishment for the executive at the recent Ontario convention and at many other conventions, including people like Dirk Prout from London and Julius Arscott, who ran for vice president, and John Orritt, who ran for treasurer, and Damon Baldwin Fox, who was elected Indigenous Peoples Rep on the Socialist Caucus slate. Courage. Eve Engler, I want him officially to be nominated for the most courageous fighter of our time, who confronts capitalist politicians who puts his cell phone in their face and say, what do you have to say about the number of kids killed today because of the funding of Zionist charities or the funding of parties directly through diplomacy, so-called supported. Eve not only confronts those people, and some people say he's too aggressive. I don't think so. I think he's just what we need. And he runs for NDP leader against the establishment. That's the name. That's the definition of courage for me.
Thank you. Beautifully said, Barry. Beautifully said. Very inspiring. So we're going to move now into some of the audience Q&As. Jasmine asks, since this is the first campaign that many of us are hearing about the vetting issue in political parties, do you think the media has contributed to that lack of awareness by refusing to talk about candidates until they're vetted? And I'm going to add to that question a little bit more about media. I've been wondering whether our panelists see parallels between party vetting and other forms of democratic suppression, like media gatekeeping and social media censorship. So if you could speak to either of those two panelists, that would be great. Maybe we can start with you, Tom.
No, I don't think I have anything to say on that.
Okay, Alex?
Yeah, I could say something on that. I think that a lot of the time it works hand in hand. Like when I spoke out against the NATO proxy war in Ukraine, I was disciplined by the federal party and thrown out of that leadership race. But the media also, was very negative, and they had expected me to sort of like resign from the Quebec leadership and that kind of thing. And I said, no, absolutely, I won't resign. And I did not backtrack on anything I said or anything like that. But after that, we did an entire election campaign out here in Quebec with 73 candidates, and there's not a single article written about it in any of the mainstream media, beyond a couple of mentions here and there, but there was no article about the campaign itself, which was completely different from the previous campaign in 2018, where I was profiled by Radio Canada and invited to Le Devoir for a video discussion and that sort of thing. So there's certain points of view, especially around criticism of NATO, which are just not acceptable to be broadcast in the mainstream Canadian media. And the political parties apply essentially the exact same line. Really, like the media is more powerful than the political parties in a lot of ways. The media is the one who decides what's acceptable, what's not, which politicians are popular, which are not, and they frame the entire discussion. So it's a huge problem. And the fact that the media is so concentrated in Canada, that's a property of just a small handful of people, they really have a huge amount of leverage to be able to impose their points of view and hire all these right-wing commentators and stuff like that, and give them these massive tribunes to spew all kinds of hate and all kinds of really nasty things. So the media is as much a problem, and I think that one of the things that's not helping the left at the moment is the lack of left-wing media outlets, which for a number of reasons, and also the editorial line that's applied not just to mainstream media but to social media in a lot of ways as well. So between the social media and the real media, there's a lot of power there, and the left could counter that perhaps by having more left-wing news outlets and kind of going beyond the mainstream. But even then, social media reach is small compared to the mainstream media still for the moment, and it might be changing over time, but it's hard to get anywhere without the mainstream media covering you. And definitely, I've read the articles about Yves's campaign where, they're saying that, oh, well, one candidate wasn't vetted, therefore, we're not writing about him, or he's not invited to the debates and that sort of thing, when, meanwhile, there's no rule about that. And, the media, rather than talking about Yves's campaign and the momentum that it has and the way that it's challenging the system and stuff like that, they'd rather write articles about how, oh, he's raised all this money and he hasn't submitted the nomination yet, therefore he must be stealing the money or something like that, is kind of the implication that they're saying. So yeah, it's a huge thing, both the media and the parties working together to censor what's acceptable scope of debate and what's not.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I mean, I think this gets to the heart of who gets to define what's acceptable dissent as well in Canadian politics. And I am wondering how this connects to a culture of fear among progressives. And I do feel that there is one where people self-censor, to stay within the limits, worship rules that don't serve them, et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering if any of you have anything to say about this. Barry, go ahead.
There's a story today on the electronic news and in the press as well about a public relations firm that has gone into polling in Alberta, which produced a story recently asserting that the pro-separatist party in Alberta, which is basically an advanced tool of the oil industry, the firm that said through its polling that this party emerging, the Independence Party in Alberta, so-called, represents 11% of the electorate. It turns out that the guy behind the poll is related to the same person who was part of the conservative political elite prior to establishing that poll. So, the media massages the message, and you need to follow the money to find out what the poll or the article that you're reading serves. We are accustomed now in the campaign with Eve to hit pieces. And there was one particularly pernicious one written by Rosie DiMano of the Toronto Star. It was published on October the 11th on page A2. And it described Eve as repellent. And it quoted him out of context. It left out the anti-bigotry, opposition to anti-Semitism piece just before the sentence that was quoted, which completely misleads the public. This is the problem under capitalism, where the press is monopolized by a few very, very large firms, and they decide what is to be said. They practically dictate your thoughts as you drink your morning coffee and read the newspaper or on screen see this kind of article. It shapes, it enters the mind and proliferates there, even though it has no merit whatsoever. And that's something that we have to confront. We use social media to the extent that we possibly can, but we know it's a challenge. It's a big challenge, and we have to face up to it. And we do have to create our own media. But the party of the working class should have its own daily newspaper. It's something I've argued in favor of for decades and decades, and I continue to hold the view that that is an important objective.
If I could just add something, Bianca. So Barry's identified pernicious problem of a polling agency, a supposed polling agency, not being truly independent of the question, which it surveyed. Related, and he said, follow the money. I couldn't agree more. Related to this, of course, is the pernicious role of think tanks. These organizations that are presented to the public as independent arbiters of what is true and what is false and what is good public policy. And ultimately, they are almost invariably, at least the ones who are being quoted the most in the corporate media, funded by highly affluent individuals, or more often than not, large corporations. And, we tried to follow the money in the case of one of the most odious so-called think tanks in Canada, the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Tamara, my God, I can't remember her last name. Lawrence. I was had a mental block. If she's listening, sorry about that, Tamara. Anyways, she and I approached she first approached them at a point in time when they had a stated policy in their annual report of disclosing their donors to anybody who showed up at their office and asked them for the list. So she showed, and previous to that time, they just would publish the donors, not all of them. They would publish the ones who consented to have their names published in their annual report. They stopped doing that because somebody wrote a very inquisitive report about their donors. And then they came up with a new policy, which is you have to physically come to our office in Ottawa and ask for it. So she goes there and she asks for it. And they say, we'll get back to you, and months go by. So I decided to follow up, and I went myself physically to Macdonald-Laurier's office. We were told by somebody there who was a lower level person, yeah, we'll get you the report or our list of donors in a few days. And then I got a letter from their lawyer 2 days later saying they changed the policy again, and they weren't going to disclose any information, not even to people who showed up at the office. So we should have a law in this country. There's an easy way to fix this problem, which requires these think tanks to disclose all of their donors, period. I mean, maybe you wouldn't have to disclose the small donations, but there should be a threshold. Anybody who donates, let's say, over $1,000, you have to disclose their name. And if you're not prepared to do that, you can't have a not-for-profit status.
Thank you, Dimitri. So we have a couple of pointed questions to the panelists. We'll just take the last couple before we sign off. Katrina wants to know from Tom and Barry, won't the NDP continue to lose activists if they once again exclude a prominent pro-Palestinian contender? Tom, Barry, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, the short answer is yes. They've shown that historically. They seem to be, they're looking at the short term and they're quite willing to shed layers of members. They get more anxious when they lose financial donations, but membership's never been a big priority, at least not in recent decades for the NDP. They really don't care as long as the money comes in, and the riding associations and the general membership tend to be a pain in the butt for them. So yeah, they're willing to pay that kind of price, but it's awkward when the vote goes down appreciably, like we've seen in the last several few years. And they certainly don't like it when the financial donations dry up.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Your thoughts, Barry?
Very briefly, the lose activists, you bet. The NDP brass, however, as Tom intimated, is happy to see them go, which is, it bothers me when I have a discussion with someone or a group of people and they say, you're absolutely right, Barry, the problem is deep-seated, the policies are poisonous, the process is rigged, and I'm leaving because of it. And I say to them as they head out the door, you're doing exactly what the party brass wants you to do. Exactly. Now, that doesn't mean you have to stay in a corrupt party forever. But when there's only one working class mass labor party in North America, you got to carry out that struggle to a certain level of completion. And you don't want the activists to be the first ones out the door, because that simply extends the lifespan of the party bureaucrats who are stifling democracy. So hang in there, work together, and let's decide collectively what we're going to do in this situation. If he wins, because there's going to be a big challenge if that is the case, if he's barred from the race or something in between happens, we need to have a collective discussion of where we go next. And we can't have that discussion easily if you walk out the door before the struggle is completed.
Thank you, Barry. Alex?
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, I completely agree with what Barry is saying. Like when I was expelled from the Green Party, like a lot of people were sending messages to the party saying, that's it, I'm going to quit. Or even if they were just voicing discontent with my expulsion, like the party would actually respond being like, oh, so do you want to cancel your membership then? So they're happy to see people go. And actually, they may act even extra disrespectful to Eve, for example, with the objective of alienating as many of his supporters as possible and getting as many of those people to quit the party as possible, you know? So personally, I was calling on all of my supporters to remain members of the Green Party because, well, I've invested over a decade of my life into this movement, right? And want to see it through. But they're happy to see people leave. So I think people have to hold on. It's a long-term effort for these things. And, you know, even sometimes if you lose one battle, you might be able to win the next one.
Thank you, Alex. Last two questions here. I think they're both for Dimitri. Jackie says, will you consider running again for Green leadership, Dimitri? Kyle says, given the parties aren't formal institutions accountable to the public, is there any legal obstacle to their selecting a candidate behind closed doors? Those both seem like Dimitri questions.
I will say at this stage, it's extremely unlikely I will ever run again to be leader of the Green Party of Canada. I for a whole bunch of reasons, I could get it. I could take half an hour just sort of summarizing them for you, but I'm skeptical at this stage that the Green Party can be a vehicle for a radical change. And I think the thing that kind of put the nail in the coffin for me was when Elizabeth May got 80% in the just concluded leadership review. I mean, I can't believe that so many people in the party supported her ongoing leadership after the train wreck of the last few years and the absolutely appalling result that the party got in the most recent election. If you think it was bad for the NDP, man, it was a complete and utter wipeout for the Green Party. And I mean, they got, I think, 1.6% of the popular vote and one seat. So, where's the accountability? And so for that reason, I at this moment, I'm feeling very discouraged about the Green Party's prospects for being an agent of radical change.
Thank you, Dimitri. Do you want to speak to the legal question, or do you want to take a pass?
I'm sorry, if you could you just repeat the question, Bianca?
Yeah, given that parties aren't, Kyle wants to know, given that parties aren't formal institutions accountable to the public, is there any legal obstacle to their selecting a candidate behind closed doors if they opt to do so? Can they just do this?
Unfortunately, yes. The courts of Canada are extremely reluctant to get involved in internal party politics. It's almost impossible to get them to intervene. And I really am skeptical that if you sought the intervention of a judge in Canada to fix this vetting process, I mean, the only circumstance where I could see it possibly, eliciting some kind of a response from a court is where the vetting committee does something that causes damage to your reputation, and then you could potentially maintain a defamation action against them. But getting a court to order the party to make the vetting process more democratic, I think there's almost no prospect of that happening.
Thank you. So we're going to close out now. My final question to all of you, which you can or cannot answer if you don't feel like it, is if you could speak directly to rank and file members who feel, and people in general who feel powerless about these processes, what would you tell them, and any closing remarks that you have before we go about our business? And I'll start with you, Tom.
Well, short answer, I guess the immediate answer is send in $5 and join the NDP to be part of this historical battle that's unfolding in front of us and that we're part of. Let's ride this out and then assess, as you do in any battle, assess where we're at for the next campaign.
Thank you, Tom. Beautiful. Barry?
I want to end on a positive note, like everyone wishes to do. The greatest achievement of this campaign thus far is not the $85,000 we've raised, not the 1,100 people who've volunteered, not the over 1,000 nominators, not the wonderful webinars. I don't say for this one because I'm on it, but all of the many that have occurred, the talented people that we have attracted, and the campaign platform. Folks, before you go to bed tonight, sometime today, go to the website and read the 47-page platform, the product of 45 talented writers and researchers with input from First Nations people and from labor activists and from tenant activists and from organizers of every kind. Go and read it, and you may be wondering, what hope do we have? Therein lies the hope. Therein lies a tangible product of collective working class human labor. See that and be invigorated, be inspired. That's what I say. And also pay your $5, damn it all, and become a member so you can vote. Whatever the outcome of this is, you will be part of the process to discuss what we do next. That's the democratic option.
Thank you, Dimitri.
We got to make sure that Eve is in this race, man. Otherwise, this whole exercise is going to prove to be completely unproductive. Eve's got to be in the race, and I urge everybody in a civilized way, not in a way that is perceived to be hostile or antagonistic, but in a civilized way, communicate to the people who are charged with the responsibility of approving candidates that you think Canadian politics needs to hear from Eve. We need a voice like that in a leadership race for a major party, whatever the members may ultimately decide. Otherwise, it's just going to be more of the same, and more of the same is leading to our annihilation at this stage.
Alex.
Yeah, well, thanks for the invitation. Thanks for everybody who came out to take part in this discussion today. And it's really nice to see that there's left-wing people that are getting involved with party politics and, challenging the leadership and running for leadership races. I think there's a lot of opportunities similar to this one that have been missed in the past. So the fact that Yves is running now and the level of support he has really shows that it is possible. And I think that, as I mentioned before, the left has neglected party politics for far too long. There's a lot of influence to exert. Every person's voice can have an impact in this. These are parties that are relatively small. In my experience, the doors have been a lot more open than people would maybe expect. And so everything we can do there to push the entire Canadian politics to the left towards more protection of the environment and socialism is a step in the right direction. And so thanks for everybody who's involved with this campaign and other campaigns to achieve similar objectives.
Thank you, Alex. So I just want to thank Tom Baker, Rana Zaman, Barry Weisleder, Alex Tyrrell, Dimitri Lascaris for their insights, for their honesty, for the commitment to democratic renewal. I think that one of the things that we've heard today that's really clear is that democracy is not granted from above. It has to be asserted from below. And, while this vetting stuff, the vetting issue may sound procedural, it goes to the heart of who gets to participate, whose ideas are considered legit, and whether or not our political parties actually serve us, the people. So thanks to everyone who's tuned in. Thanks for your questions, and thanks for your continued belief that, that democracy is worth fighting for. Bianca, Mugyenyi, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us, and let's keep organizing for the kind of democracy that can't be denied. Good night, everyone. To another, depending on where you are. Solidarity.